particular webcast series will run bi-monthly, and it aims to shine a spotlight on the SMB sector, specifically the risks that should be on their radar. And every episode, we're going to focus on a new sector, and sometimes it may even just be a topic that affects all SMB sectors. So please follow us, connect with us, barcodesecurity.com/riskradar for an archive of past shows, and then also to see what's scheduled. So without further ado, for this very first special episode, we're taking a look at the education sector. And I have the pleasure of being joined by Dr. Arun Vishwanath, a leading security expert with many years of experience researching security trends and working to improve cyber resilience. So welcome, Arun. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Chris, it's really exciting to be here on your first show. New season, new year, new show. This is exciting.
Yeah, man. Yeah, episode 1. I'm excited, and again, we're sort of taking a different approach than the BarCode podcast. So, I'm glad that you're able to join me, and I'll try to monitor the comments here throughout the program. And so, if you have any questions, throw it in the comment section, and if I catch it, I will definitely bring those up. So, Arun, let's start with a stat. I want to start with a stat because I think it's a very important stat that really just sets the stage for this conversation. So schools experienced over 1 million students' data being exposed in breaches last year. And I think that's a very surprising stat. I was surprised when I heard it. So I'd like to hear from you, in your view, what factors make the education sector uniquely vulnerable to cyber attacks?
Well, so first things first, Chris, let's look at the stats over here, right? I mean, you're talking about at least 1 million records exposed, maybe millions more, right? Cumulatively by now, I wrote about this a decade ago. I said, by now, I'm talking about 2018, 2015 or so. I said, every one of our records have been in some breach exposed, right? Have been taken. And now it's many times over. A child, before they even know it, for nothing they ever did, their data has been compromised, has been stolen, has been resold, as God alone knows in what database where. Many of these breaches are coming directly at the school system, right? Last year, and again, the statistics on this vary. There's really no good hard data on much of this, and we're going to talk about why that is the case. But we have about 1,436 different school and university breaches and attacks that were reported, right? 1,500 of them. Just one breach alone. You and I have some mutual friends here who talked about this, who are in the Clark County School District in Las Vegas. They suffered a massive breach last year. This was late last year. Just to give you an idea, Clark County services 300,000 students, right? And as that breach was going on, I wrote about it in Dark Reading in one of my articles. There was another breach that was going on in California, in one of the school systems there. So, and it was essentially the same ransomware being used and reused. So tons of these attacks, we're seeing huge changes in what they're doing. In Clark County, for instance, the attacker, at least that's who we think it was directly corresponding with parents. It's a new law, right? They no longer just talk to go after the people who they, institutions, they go after the victims directly. So why is this happening, right? If one reason, it's easy. Yeah, aging infrastructure, right? The infrastructure in most of our schools throughout the nation, it's old. There are lots of legacy systems in place. More than anything else, there's a huge skill gap, right? They can't pay enough for security, right? Most companies can't. Imagine a school system that's easy picking, and they're sitting on a ton of data, right? Data of kids who are out there who don't even know their data is out there, right? So the skill gap is a huge problem, right? It's easy picking, and most importantly, what's the solution space, right? It hasn't changed in over 5 years, 10 years. The solution space has not changed. There's really nothing new that we have done to protect institutions other than locking them down completely. And a school system, I mean, if you, me, we all have kids in the school system. You know how it is. It's they give them a Chromebook and it's complete lockdown from there on.
Yeah.
I don't know how you teach people to use a technology when it's completely locked down. That seems to be the solution for every problem, which is lock it down. It's not going to work. So that's the core of the problem, right? There's a huge skill gap. Legacy systems, no changes in what we can do, and it's like a police state, with technology.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And to
how do
lock
we
down those
change?
Chromebooks, yeah, to lock down those Chromebooks, you're relying upon, whatever IT resources that they're using, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's right. So there's someone's mandating this, and whoever that someone is has, a skill set that is pretty much limited, right? So if you look at, we look at average salaries as a good indicator of what we're attracting, right? There's this old saying, right? What you give is what you get, right? You throw peanuts, you get monkeys. And so we don't pay enough to our teachers, to our administrators. We just don't pay them enough. And if you look at, even in the school system, right? Yeah, it takes 20 years for a teacher to basically make as much as a mid-level uh, security person makes, right? So are we going
yeah,
to monetize that system enough to protect it?
that's true. So let's talk about that. Is a compensation issue? Is it a training issue? How big of a priority is advancing the the
I think
training aspect to
that's
staff,
right.
to
A
teachers?
lot of it, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, no, no. I was just going to say, how important is it to prioritize security training to
That's right.
staff?
So,
And
so
do you
we have
think
a
it should
we
be
have
a
a
core? Yeah.
That's right. And I see someone's got a question on the blog too, uh, you know,
Yes.
on the live feed, and it's a question of budgets, right? I mean, there's a systemic problem in terms of, and we know this, right? It's not just cyber in terms of cyber education. We have a systemic problem in K through 12 right now, right? I mean, we have a systemic problem in terms of budgets. It's a very localized system, right? So every school district, I'm in, Buffalo, New York, we're one of the poorest school districts. I mean, there's always a shortfall of budgets. It's a tough one. This is a tough nut to crack, and cyber is not a priority right now, right? And I talk to parents all over the nation. I've been talking to school administrators. I've been talking to teachers all over the country. And one of the things you get as a response is, who's going to do the teaching? Whose responsibility is cyber education right now? Where is it in that priority scale? Is it important enough for us to put money towards it, to allocate time? So there's the budget issue and there's the prioritization issue, right? And the
Yeah.
question is it a priority? I know, the White House has prioritized it in terms of, workforce development, uh, but that's not enough, right? We need to, as a nation, come to grips with the fact that, hey, cyber is the only frontier, not the next frontier or the one that's coming down the road. It is what our kids are doing. And it's not going to happen just in a Chromebook. It's happening on their phones, on their iPads, on every device that we give them at home, from their Game Cubes to their Game Boys to their, PlayStations.
Right.
We've got to be able to protect every one of those things, and we got to teach them to protect that.
So let's go to Dave's question. Can you can you hear me, Arun?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, my bad. All right. So Dave asks, what's the answer with low school systems budgets but massive threats that cost a lot of money to build fixes around them?
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, we've got to figure out a way to prioritize passing on those fixes. So many of these fixes are being applied in corporate. Corporate America has got a lot of these solutions that are being implemented. We've got to figure out a way to transfer that onto systems that can't pay for it. So it's a,
Right.
it's a kind of a paid forward system that we're going to have to develop. I would like a system where there's a public-private partnership here, where corporations adopt school systems rather than school systems going to have to constantly be monetized by local taxes alone. We just can't solve this problem, right? So that's a systemic solution that might actually work, right? But there are many of these things, right? We also have to deal with salaries. We have to deal with the entire sector. 55% of the teachers in the last survey did not want to continue in the profession. So
Mm.
there's also that end of it, right? How do we attract young people to teach tech? Who's
Yeah.
going to teach the tech? How are we going to pay them and incentivize them enough? And there's enough things that people can do in the gig economy where the burnout levels at schools are very high, right? There's a 15-20% shortage coming out of in most school systems in terms of qualified workforce.
Mm.
And that's another layer that we seldom talk about, which is, teachers are burning out. There's not enough time in the school day to teach cyber skills, and I think that's something we need to talk about as well. So it's not just, do we protect the system? We also have to protect who the system serves. And who does it serve?
Right.
It serves our kids, all our kids, right? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. It's
something we're not here.
enabling. I think it's enabling teachers, and then you need to trust them to enable the students.
That's right,
Um,
because right now those kids are coming into the workforce and then being trained.
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
It's like waiting for the child to start driving before we teach them how to wear a seatbelt. We don't do that, do we? We teach them right off the bat how to do that. So cyber safety, if we start doing this at K through 12, which is, I've talked about it, advocated for it since 2015, 2014. If we start doing it then, we have a workforce that's more qualified. The system feeds itself. Right now, what we're trying to do is throw money at the problem, and I think that's the hard way to do it.
Yeah. So as teachers come in and they're enabled now, right? They are able to understand the security realm, right? They're able to create a curriculum that helps train students. What are the most impactful lessons from your perspective that we can teach students?
Right. And Chris, right now there isn't a curriculum. Okay, this is
right.
one of the big problems, right? So the thing is, there are various schools that are trying their own thing. Nobody really knows what's enough and what needs to be covered, right? I mean, that's your question. Like, what is enough? Everybody does a little bit of password, a little bit of cyberbullying, sometimes not, or it's a lockdown of the Chromebook. My question is, what's the curriculum going to look like? And I'm going to go back to that question you asked about, what do we teach, right? And the answer to that is, it's something that we have developed at this point, right? This idea of cyber hygiene. We have a program on cyber hygiene that we are developing, and in this program of cyber hygiene, we have a comprehensive approach to what it is that needs to be taught. Okay, and the question is, we want to, and I've spent 20 years as an academic researching this topic to come up with this idea of what that curriculum should look like, right? So we have a curriculum that basically teaches children or helps children gain resilience. And what is it? What do we mean by resilience? And it's basically developing those 3 R's, right? Knowing how to resist attacks, knowing how to react to attacks, and knowing how to recover from attacks. So we're looking at these 3 high-level abilities that a child should proactively learn through a curriculum, be it in a school system, being it on an app. But that's what I think needs to be done, right? And it needs to be done across a series of different touch points, right? So we call that the safety touch points, right? Social media, authentication, transmission, device hygiene, and so on and so forth, right? So you have to learn this. And we have a program that actually says, we have a measurement inventory, we have a series of questions, a survey, classwork that you could do, which helps you learn these cyber hygiene skills. The problem right now, though, is no one's implementing it, right? We have a few school systems that are interested in it, that are learning it, that are testing it, that are using it, but it's not a priority right now. So the question that has to be answered first is, where do we, as a nation, as parents and as teachers and administrators, is cybersecurity and cyber safety and cyber hygiene a priority? We got to establish that before we come up with the product and the curriculum, because the product, the curriculum, the science, it's already there. The issue is one of will.
Is, like you said, is recognizing that there's a priority. And
so it's a question of motivation, right? I mean, it's a question of motivation. It's a question of wanting to make sure that this is something that's implemented. And we see the same issue with a lot of different things, even in organizations, right? I mean, how much of a priority is cybersecurity? I mean, do we want to just deal with it after the fact, or do we want to actually do something proactively? In this case, when it comes to children, I think you have to do it proactively. You got to go after it now, because all we do reactively today is give everybody some credit monitoring.
Correct. Yeah, and that's after it's too late.
It's after it's too late. And by now, I think everybody in your audience, anybody in the United States, has received some credit monitoring notification, right? Some of us have gotten it more than once. All our kids have gotten credit monitoring. And how does that fix any problem?
Right. Yeah. It hasn't. Um, it hasn't. So when we talk about the connection between, okay, we realize it's a priority. We get to that point, and then it's basically also connecting the importance to the student, right? And I think there's a struggle there where it depends on the age range of the student, right? Their adaptation to
Right.
learning or wanting to learn varies, right? If you could enforce a security component to get into Fortnite, that would work at my house.
That's
Um,
right.
but how do we get to that point? Number one, once we establish there's a priority, how do we, you know, work with these tools, with this software, with these activities to put those programs in place and incorporate that?
Right, and I think this is really an interesting. I've talked about this to parents. I've done different surveys with teachers, and we're working with students. Right. One of the things is that only about a third of the parents actually talk to their kids about cybersecurity.
Mm,
Right. So about two-thirds of parents, but the good on the bright side, two-thirds of the parents do talk to their kids. Two out of three parents out there talk to their kids about cybersecurity. But the issue that they face and the issue that they constantly raise is, I don't really know if my kid cares.
all right.
The child doesn't listen, or they don't think they care enough. Right? Children have a different relationship with privacy than we as adults who kind of evolved with the technology, as against them who basically had the technology all their lives do. So the issue is, to make it interesting, we have to develop something that works in their learning spectrum. Right? It can be something that looks like classwork, nor can it be something that looks like the parent talking to them. It can be an adult giving them an instructional set. It has to be something that comes to them at their point of contact, right? So maybe it's just before, every time you put your PlayStation on and you kind of enter your credentials to get in, perhaps, and then you give them a lesson,
Hmm.
and that's your point of contact when it's the most salient. Or it has to be something that you learn from your friends, like each of them does in a group. Right? Because again, remember, a
Yeah.
lot of kids go to other kids when
Right.
they have security problems before they go to a parent. And it's the literal blind leading the blind, right? And today, my biggest concern as a parent is not just my kid being, cyber safe. It's all his or her friends being cyber safe, because,
Yeah.
you can have a cascade upwards of a security threat, right? So it's trying to find that, point of contact and making that information, packaging it in a manner in which it's relevant,
Right.
in a manner in which it's valid. It's not classwork because they're just going to, not pay attention to it, or they're not going to think it's important enough. Can't be like an adult talking down to them either,
And
right?
I think you
And
have to
then
look at the pattern, right, of what kids in different age
right,
brackets
right. And so
gravitate
we
to.
see, yeah, and we see three groups over here, right? So we see the
Mhm.
kindergarten kids, the middle school kids, and the high school kids, and all three. And again, it breaks across gender lines in terms of what their interest levels are, because around middle school is when they start getting into social media. By high school, they're high in social media. In kindergarten, it's slightly different, but it's not today with most kindergarten kids. I mean, they have the ability to learn a little bit about passwords, to understand the basics of it. But by middle school, they're ready for much of these lessons that they should have before they go to high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm talking to parents of children, parents with children in middle school, and that's usually when cybersecurity, cyber safety conversations around the kitchen table increase quite a bit, right? And that's the point at which we need to be there, right? We need to have a program in place at that point that is interesting enough, compelling enough, entertaining enough, so at least we can get that baseline skills in. And the value of this is for every one of us, right? Because these kids are going to get into the workforce eventually. And if we can, create an upward cascade in their abilities, that benefits all of us.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a second in terms of policy changes that are needed or reform around student data protections and breach notifications within the education sector specifically. What do you feel needs to happen to have the biggest impact today, or
Right.
how do we get there?
Well, I think from a policy point of view, I think the breach notification system itself is something, it kind of failed us in many ways, right?
Yeah.
I wrote about the need for breach notifications. I was one of the first guys to write about this in the media. And what eventually happened, right? So right now, every state has some kind of breach notification law. We all follow, California's, laws in terms of how this is done. But the problem with breach notification is the lawyers took over. It's no longer just, and that's all great for every lawyer out there, but basically it just follows the letter of the law, right?
Mhm.
Which is basically telling you what was done at the least minimum liability that can occur to you and that can occur to the company, and basically giving you some credit monitoring.
Yeah.
That's not what that system was meant to do. It was meant to inform you of what was to happen or what could have happened, so you could change your passwords before the 1 month or 2 months or 3 months would pass. Today, you get a letter in the mail that tells you what happened essentially on the time it was meant to come, right before the deadline passed. Doesn't do much for any of us.
Right.
Right? And so we need to update that system so it's much more proactive, so that it's much more informative. And then we need to change credit monitoring, right? Right now, we need to have universal credit monitoring for free for everyone across their lifespan, regardless of whether you've had a breach, not only after someone, did something that they shouldn't have. And that's something, we have to think about. And every child should have credit monitoring, whether they like it or not.
Yep.
So, these are policy level changes, right? We have to increase funding to our school system. So again, there's more money in it for cyber. We have to prioritize cyber education, right? And this is not just, today, a lot of cybersecurity issues get pushed under tech skills. Cybersecurity is not just a tech skill. It's a skill you got to have across the entire learning spectrum. So we need to prioritize that. And that requires funding, and that requires a lot of will, and that requires corporates to also probably step up, adopt some of these schools, and start funding these solutions. So as a system, if we start prioritizing cyber education, this has a cascading effect across the entire system. And I think that's what we need to do. And one of the things, if you for all the viewers out there who have kids, it's like, are we satisfied with the cyber safety training that they're getting today? That's a question I ask parents out there, right? If you're in the school system, if you're an administrator out there, I've talked to many administrators and many teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think you're doing enough in the school system? Right?
Yeah, I think you have to look at, from what I've seen, you really have to look at the school system itself. There are certain school systems where you may have, more technical based programs that, instill that knowledge.
Right.
But I would say for the most part, no, you're not seeing that. You're relying upon that IT to lock down their Chromebook, or being in the security field. Like, it's up to you, right?
It's
So,
right. And so a lot of this is happening at the kitchen table,
yes.
and the big fear here is, do we know enough, right? Anybody in security, you, me, we all know this, and anybody who's in our audience who's in security, they know one thing, when you know enough about security, you never know enough. It's
That's
like,
true.
it's one of those realities of it. So if all of us in security don't know enough to guide our own children beyond what we think we can do, what's happening with the parents who don't have much of a security efficacy out there?
Right.
And that's an issue that I think we need to address. So for me, I know we like to talk about institutional problems, and they're there, and it's easier to blame institutions than to solve the problem at its core. And the problem at its core, to me, is we need to figure out how to get our kids cyber safe. Because the world they're entering, their data has already been compromised. Everything about them is already out there. Their relationship with privacy is very different than ours. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
That's the challenge that I'm trying to deal with, right? So I'm trying to say, how do we solve this problem for our children?
Yeah. It's definitely a challenge, and I know we're running up on time here, so I do want to encourage everyone to, check out BarCode Security for more information on this. We are here to help you. We're either here, and I'm saying we as in BarCode along with Arun, right? We're partners in this.
Absolutely. That's right. Hey, we have a program on cyber hygiene. I'm willing to give it to anybody who wants to try it out. If you're in a school system, reach out to Chris, reach out to me. Let's test our programs. Let's do this. We'll give it to you for free. We want that cyber hygiene to be something that becomes part of everybody's curriculum. Every child out there should have access to it. It's your skills, my skills, and the skills of everybody in the audience. Let's make it happen.
And whether that's, if you have a program in place, we can help you evaluate that too, or if you have nothing in place, we can help you, devise that roadmap to success together. So Arun, thanks for joining me. Before we go, can you just let the viewers know, where they can find and connect with you online?
Well, you can find me on my website. It's arunvishwanath.us. I'm on LinkedIn. Just go to my website. You can contact me through my website. My email address, everything is listed right there. Feel free to reach out. And I think this is important, right? I mean, every one of us, if you have kids, if you're about to have kids, if you've had kids, this is priority. And if you're a teacher out there, I know you care about this. So talk to us. We're happy. We're here to help you guys.
Or if you are a kid, because you'd be a kid tuning in. But yeah, let us know. Let us know how we can help, and be sure to join us on the next episode of Risk Radar. It's going down on January 30th, and we'll be discussing risk within small to medium-sized healthcare organizations. So that will be a good one. Again, Arun, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. And until then, keep your radar on, everybody. Take care.
Hey, great to be here. See you guys.
See you.